So yesterday we were talking about the fact that after World War II, there was nobody around to run Korea. Everybody who was capable is dead. Everybody who was potentially a leader had been shot by the Japanese or just died of old age at this point. So Japan's in a situation now where the country gets divided. Again, it's mostly just a matter of practicality. The United States and the Soviet Union look at their lists and say, okay, we want Hungary, Czechoslovakia, we want Korea, whatever. They work down their list and they kind of get to the end and Korea's left. And the United States wants to make Korea a capitalist democracy. The Soviet Union wants to make Korea a communist state. As a result, they decide, let's just draw a line in half and figure out what we want to do later. And this is really the origins of the Cold War as we know it today. And so Korea gets divided at the 38th parallel. And it is literally some guy in Paris, France, who takes a map and goes and puts in a line and says, this is about the halfway point of Korea. And so Korea gets divided at the 38th parallel. In the north, they will try to establish a communist dictatorship. In the south, they will try to establish a capitalist democracy. Now, neither side is necessarily convinced that they're going to maintain these two separate pieces. They believe that the north will eventually ensure communism all throughout the south and vice versa. However, that plan was made very different. Because at the conclusion of World War II, the United States came in from the south and we brought troops over from Japan who had been there as a result of our occupation of Japan after World War II. The Soviets invaded from the north as they came in from China, trying to help the communists win the civil war going on in China and also getting control of North Korea. So they decide, okay, 38th parallel, and that line right there is about where the 38th parallel is. The line that is behind that purple line, the line that's behind there is the current border of Korea. So you can see the current border of North and South Korea isn't very far off from the 38th parallel. Well, things are going along fine in North and South Korea. I wouldn't say fine, but they are at a tenuous peace until finally, in 1950, North Korea invades the South. North Korea was totally ill-prepared for this invasion. South Korea was totally ill-prepared for this invasion. They were not ready for this. They didn't anticipate this. They didn't expect this. And North Korea is trying simply to unify Korea under one leader. The leader of North Korea is a guy by the name of Kim Il-sung. He is the communist leader put into power by the Soviet Union. Now, at the time in the United States, we believed that this invasion was planned by the Soviet Union, and that the Soviet Union was really pushing this, and we felt that the North Koreans were expanding communism and spreading communism into South Korea. We now know, after doing some historical research, and now that time has passed and historical documents have become public knowledge, we know for a fact that the Soviet Union encouraged North Korea not to invade South Korea, but that Kim Il-sung simply wanted to unify Korea. He didn't care if it was communist, capitalist, he just wanted a unified Korea. So these communists invade the South. Well, the United States gets very nervous about this invasion, and we decide we want to do something to help. The problem is we can't really declare war because Korea has done nothing to us necessarily. So we work through some backdoor channels, work through the United Nations, and the United Nations eventually says we must help end this conflict. And for the United Nations, helping to end this conflict simply means that they're going to send in military troops. So the United Nations empowers the commander of the UN forces in the Pacific, a guy by the name of Douglas MacArthur, a famous American war hero in World War II, to do something about this North Korean invasion and to try to stop this war in North Korea. So MacArthur sweeps around, and you can see over here where this arrow is, he sweeps around behind the North Korean forces and is able to cut off North Korean forces from the south. Interesting. Whoa, sorry about that. Stop it. That's bad. Sorry about that, guys. So he sweeps around. South Korea pushes that border back up towards North Korea, and they say, hey, we're here to control this situation, and things are working out great. Well, the problem is by 1951, when this has all finally taken place, and South Korea is on the verge of uniting Korea as a capitalist democracy, there's a little country up here to the north called China. And their leader, Mao Zedong, who is a communist, is saying, I'm not so sure I want the United States military this close to the border of China. Now, at this point, the United States is not calling this the Korean War. It is the Korean conflict, because we never declared war. We are there simply as a part of the United Nations to help protect South Korea from North Korea. Well, as part of that, things start to get a little bit tense. And as we get closer and closer to the Chinese border, we're getting more and more reports of Chinese soldiers fighting with the North Koreans. Now, General Douglas MacArthur in the United States, he wants to start dropping nuclear bombs on North Korea, start dropping nuclear bombs on China to really send a message. But President Truman wasn't sure that that was a good idea. So he says, no, we're not going to do that. Well, more and more Chinese kind of seep in, and finally in 1950, late in the fall of 1951, the Chinese government responds, and they send in 300,000 Chinese forces to support the North Korean troops. These men push the border back into South Korea, and they push back past Seoul, South Korea, all the way into the well south of that 38th parallel. The United States counters, the United Nations counters, they push back, and by 1952, the border is established as it shows here. And so as this border is established, this is today's border between North Korea and South Korea. It's the most heavily defended border on the planet. Both North and South Korea have planted millions of landmines to ensure that neither one will really invade the other. And finally, in 1952, they agreed to a ceasefire. On June 25th, 1950, the conflict began. North invaded South, U.S. and UN helped. And finally, by July of 1953, the conflict is over. They stopped shooting in 52, and in 53, they finally signed an armistice. But even that armistice was not a very solid peace, to say the least, because in Korea today, technically North Korea and South Korea are still at war. They never signed a peace agreement. They simply signed a treaty that said, we won't attack you if you don't attack us. Now, many times the North has bluffed and perhaps attempted to invade the South, and vice versa. The South has flexed their muscles a little bit and said, we're going to invade the North. But to this day, they still have not signed a peace treaty, and North and South Korea are still technically at war. Now, after this video clip, you're going to look at another video clip about 3 minutes. This is a video clip about Panmunjom. This is on the border between North and South Korea, and it's one of the only spots where there are not landmines on the border between North and South Korea. It's only about a 3-minute clip, and it's going to show you some things, but I want you to pay special attention to the soldiers who are standing with half of their body sticking out facing the building and half of their body not, because it's very interesting to look at those guys. I'm going to let the guy giving the tour do most of the talking and talk about what happens there at Panmunjom and what happens across the border in North Korea. So the components of this presentation are over in terms of the Korean War, and then we'll talk about modern Korea a little bit on Friday.